I think Jerry Jones is always looking to accumulate quarterbacking talent. And when he became available for a price of a fourth-round pick, I think Dallas felt like the value was too great to pass up for a player that they once had a second-round grade on. And so they add him to the mix, and obviously they'll be moving on from Will Grier. And I think Trey Lance will be the number 3 in Dallas this upcoming season, with Dak Prescott being the starter and Cooper Rush, who signed an extension this offseason, serving as the 2, with Trey Lance working and growing and hoping to improve in the Dallas offense and in the system. He's got 2 years left on the contract. He's got a 5th-year option. Let's keep in mind that Dak Prescott next year is scheduled to make $59 million. So maybe they think, hey, we try to grow Trey Lance. Maybe he turns into something. Maybe he doesn't. If he doesn't and leaves, we get back a comp pick anyway. So we'll roll the dice on him for a few years and see what we have in Trey Lance, who obviously went number 3 overall.
You know, Schefter, one of the great parts about when the Cowboys do something significant is that Jerry Jones is going to tell you exactly why and how it went down. He was quite transparent about how this deal came together. That's some candor right there, Dan. Does it matter to you that Jerry Jones didn't tell Dak Prescott before he made this trade?
Absolutely.
Or Mike McCarthy, for that matter.
Why not? Why would you not tell them?
I mean, again, the timing is of the essence, but
wow. You take 5 minutes to go tell your head coach and your starting quarterback.
Yeah.
So the contextual or the context of the situation for me is everything. I can appreciate the addition of Trey Lance. I think, you know, football and business-wise, it makes sense for Dallas to do that.
Yeah.
In relation to Dak Prescott, 2 things. One, he's coming off of the worst season of his career, 17 interceptions if you include the playoffs. He's missed 17 games the last 3 years. Okay. The last 2 playoff losses, they've scored a total of 29 points, and he's got $60 million due next year, to Schefty's point. So there's a lot floating around the big year for Dak Prescott pressure.
Yeah.
And so when you make a decision that is going to directly impact the day-to-day work life of your starting quarterback, you absolutely owe it to that person. Just a simple, hey, I'm not asking you for permission. We're doing this because I get to make that decision. Just as a heads up, because it's going to impact the way he goes about his job or on a day-to-day basis. That's why I sit there and I go, I have no idea if you're the Dallas Cowboys, understanding everything about the situation, how you don't at least give him and the head coach a heads up.
Look, I'm no body language reading expert, okay? So, but when Jerry answered these questions, if you noticed, he was there was no laughter. He wasn't joking with the reporters. He was like, yeah, I did it. And no, I didn't tell him. Which to me, this is just my opinion. This was calculated. I didn't tell him because I don't have to tell him. And number 2, you know what? Regardless of everything that Dan just said, and I agree 100% with it, because in my time in Philadelphia, Andy Reid, we acquired Michael Vick when we still had Donovan McNabb, okay? Andy wasn't about doing things like that. He didn't keep anything from anybody, especially the biggest of transactions. He let everyone know, I'm going to handle it, and I'm going to talk to the parties involved personally. Because he always emphasized relationships. And I'm not saying Jerry Jones doesn't have a relationship with Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott. But Dan is absolutely right. When you are acquiring a guy who was the number 3rd pick overall just 2 years ago at quarterback, you're not acquiring some washed-up guy who you're just hoping maybe could give Dak a few snaps if something happened to him or has insurance. You're talking about a guy who, depending upon where you fall on the evaluation spectrum, you're talking about a guy who some people felt could be a franchise quarterback like myself, or some people thought, well, you know what? He didn't play a whole lot of football in college and he just needs more time, which he still falls into that camp. We still don't know who Trey Lance really is.
Absolutely.
And no one can tell me otherwise. You don't know. And he has a super high upside. He also could have a super low floor relative to where he was drafted, which we've already figured out. 1 team down, right? He's on his 2nd team now. But there's no way you can tell me Jerry didn't know what he was doing when he didn't tell his franchise quarterback and his head coach, we're acquiring a guy who is very highly thought of at the most important position of the team when our own franchise quarterback is coming off of a year in which Dan just articulated. And there's no way you're not going to tell me that's not calculated, and he didn't do it for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but something tells me it's to say, hey, look, man, let's go.
See, I agree with that.
Let's go. This is a big year for us. It's a big year for you, Mike. It's a big year for you, Dak. It's a big, and I don't have to tell you anything. Yeah. You just know it's a big year. Period.
I agree with everything that Louis is saying, and I don't think either of us disagree that this was a smart move for Dallas when it comes to acquiring a certain player for the cost.
Right.
But I've heard this said today. He's a backup quarterback or he's a third string. There's no threat to Dak Prescott. No, it's not. This is a guy that 3 years ago was the number 3 pick in the NFL draft. This time last year was the starting quarterback at a team that went into an NFC championship game. Yeah. This is a guy that, to Schefter's report a couple minutes ago, this football team and organization, Dallas Cowboys, if I heard it correctly, had a second-round grade on. I'm not disagreeing that this makes your football team better. What I'm sitting there saying is, coming off of last year, when your own players on your football team verbally state how the turnovers hurt them in the playoffs. Yeah. And then your head coach talks about running the football more. Yeah. And your owner says your guys got to turn the football over less. They open up with both New York teams to start this season. Could you imagine now, because of this and not notifying them, if you start 0-2 and the quarterback doesn't play great, now you're just bringing noise. Yeah. Instead of sitting there going, we're good, Dak's going to turn it around, he's going to get better, this is a big week, it's going to be answering questions. And to Lewis's point about Jerry Jones' body language, I was watching Dak answer that being like, seriously, I got to answer this right now because I didn't know anything about it. That's my point. It's just
you feel bad for Dak in that moment.
Because you know what, Dan? You know what he has to do? Now Dak has to fill in the blanks because Jerry didn't fill them in for him. Yeah. Like what does this mean? What does it mean if I throw a pick? Yeah. What else are they talking about that, look, I thought it was supposed to be an open door type of situation. I'm the franchise guy.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
That's what everybody tells me. Yeah. Right? And maybe I still am, but with the franchise guy comes a certain level of communication that not everybody else gets. We all know this.
Right.
We know this, that the quarterbacks get certain things that everyone else doesn't get.
Yeah, well, totally. And Schefter, you already mentioned the cap hit for Dak Prescott in 2024. Totally. $59+ million. There's no way he will play on a $59 million cap hit next year, which means that one way or another, 2023 is a very important season for Dak Prescott, all of a sudden in a way that we did not previously realize.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.